I feel like I had to make a disclaimer for this video given the rather dodgy nature of leaks as a Hoyoverse creator and the fact that while I'm not restricted in what I'm allowed to say, I don't want to burn any bridges. This video will in no way disseminate information on content for future versions. My goal is to discuss how leaks became so widespread throughout Honkai Star Rail's community and the consequences that followed as a result. It was something I felt like was worth talking about since while I don't particularly care to engage in drama or discourse about this, I believe there's a lot that can be learned from all this, especially when looking at things from a game design perspective. Almost every player who spends any amount of time browsing platforms in which video games are discussed is bound to be made aware of future content long before it's officially announced by developers. Leaks of new games being developed, people getting their hands on a game before it's even purchasable in stores, game review sites having early access, individuals are even willing to spend ludicrous amounts of money to get a copy of the game early. I remember XQC offered to pay out like $1 million to Rockstar to let him play GTA 6 in advance. So the concept of leaks is by no means endemic to Hoyo games. However, even among the gacha industry where players always enjoy looking at future content, never have I seen such aggressive consumption of leaks as seen in Honkai Star Rail. So in today's video we'll be discussing why the Star Rail community is so obsessed with leaks to the point where Hoyo themselves basically had no choice but to join in. Considering not everyone has the wherewithal to drop hundreds of dollars in microtransactions on a whim, Foresight encourages planning in advance. Now conveniently for some gachas like Blue Archive, the Japanese version is several updates ahead of the global one, allowing the global player base to look at what the Japanese player base has in terms of units and content, and prepare accordingly for when the content in question eventually reaches global servers. This practice is ubiquitous. Players tend to roadmap which units to save up for and which ones to skip, since oftentimes accumulating enough resources for characters is a month-long process. As such, it would be very beneficial if you could see what's on the horizon. Some developers are more lenient than others when it comes to player bases going through files and whatnot for the sake of data mining possible future characters, items, game modes, and bosses. In other words, they couldn't care less about leaks. Hoyoverse, on the other hand, at least in the beginning, was decidedly against players trying to know more than they should. Dating back to Genshin's release in 2020, they have and are still taking measures to suppress premature distribution of future content where they're able to, going as far as to copyright strike YouTube, Twitch, BD channels to support videos showing beta or leaked footage, suspending or rather attempting to suspend Twitter accounts who share leaked information, and whatnot. To be fair, they're within their right to do so. There's a recent video game companies make all developers and involved parties sign NDAs that say we'll take your house if you tell anyone. It's both to have control over the anticipation of said title, but more importantly to prevent the spread of misinformation, which can ultimately damage the commercial success of said product. Most Star Rail players have begun their Hoyoverse experience with Genshin Impact, and you may remember there was a lot of confusion and discourse over the game as players scrambled to learn about the game's mechanics and systems. The whole war on misinformation and the rise of theory crafting forever influenced the community, and with the major subsection of its content consisting of guide channels, to make sure one's guide videos are as accurate as possible, logic dictates that knowing about a character far in advance would give you plenty of time to calculate, theory craft, and experiment on the character's limits, giving you more in-depth knowledge as opposed to every other channel's more superficial information. In theory, this was meant to be a positive thing for the game. Understanding future characters can allow players to lay all doubts on whether or not they're worth pulling for to rest. With the time-sensitive nature of units giving you a finite window of opportunity, players want to know immediately if a unit is good, not months after they've missed their chance and have to wait for a rerun. Be that SMA, leaks can also be a double-edged sword. While they allow you to learn about a new character early, there's always a chance that said intel might be premature, resulting in players forming inconclusive assumptions about a unit that can lead them to not pull for them believing they're bad when they're good, or pull for them believing they're good when they're bad. So the only way for players to have an accurate understanding of a unit's potential is by finding things out for themselves and then having even more time to wait until more information comes out. In light of this, more players are entering this space and are making the information more readily accessible. Having learned from the extreme turbulence of Genshin's maiden voyage, when Star Rail came out, players were more diligent this time around. There was still an adjustment period, but the general player base was quicker on the draw in regards to ascertaining the value of units, building formulas and methodologies for judging their usefulness comparatively faster, and much of that was because of leaks. By the time units came out, they were for the most part completely solved. Many people knew how valuable Luocha would be when he came out, everyone knew how broken Fu Xuan was, how strong Jingliu and Lunai Danheng were, and the potential Kafka had. Mind you, theory crafting for Star Rail is more streamlined by virtue of it being a turn-based game. Another major reason behind the rise of leaks is of course anticipation. Knowing what to expect in the not-so-distant future has great influence over player behavior in the present. Video game companies like to release trailers for games to build up hype instead of just releasing their game out of the blue. Singles for Hoyoverse are the drip marketing. Acheron was teased to us all the way at the start of version 2 and was confirmed to be playable in 2.1. players understandably became interested in what kind of playstyle she would have, which would be capitalized on in and of itself. There were countless posts circulating major social platforms like Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, and such of her early gameplay, along with information sites posting details of her moveset and kits. And it's not just a small fraction of sweaty gamers either. Leaked videos and posts often go viral, reaching hundreds of thousands of views and millions of impressions. I'm sure there are some players who deliberately choose not to engage in leaked content for the sake of keeping the surprise fresh, but once again, the limited time you have in obtaining a unit carries a lot of equity in why players are so obsessed with knowing about units in advance. If you're constantly hearing everyone talk about how broken this unit is, that makes everyone want to pull for them. Conversely, if you hear everyone talking about how trash the unit is, that makes everyone not want to pull for them. Beyond gameplay, it's also plain curiosity. By this point, everyone more or less assumes that anyone who doesn't look like a generic NPC and isn't explicitly a villain who's dead will be playable. If Kafka, Silver Wolf, and Blade all become obtainable in-game, then it only makes sense for Sam to be playable as well, and so naturally players want to find out what kind of playstyle he has. Then you have Robin, who plays a minor yet critical role in the Penacony storyline, and she was drip marketed to us alongside Boothill. Consequently, players wanted to see what her moveset is, and now there are dozens of videos on YouTube and Twitter about her very unique ultimate. I can't show it in this video because I said I wouldn't show leaks explicitly, but I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, while consumption of leaks was always present in Genshin, exemplified by players endeavoring to collect all the new units' ascension materials and whatnot so they can insta-max level them upon release, I find that it's even more prevalent in StarRail for 3 reasons. First and foremost, combat. StarRail's combat has empirically taxed our knowledge of the game and its characters a lot more than Genshin has. While the latter might be more complex in the sense that real-time action has a lot more variables and things to consider, in practice Genshin Impact is very easy. Most players don't have to be entirely familiar with terms like internal cooldown, poise damage, or snapshotting to clear everything in the game. Provided they have a surface level understanding of their team and decent weapons and artifacts, you can clear floor 12 Spiral Abyss no problem. In contrast, StarRail's a bit more demanding. While ultimately yes, you can alleviate much of this game's difficulty by having really decked out characters, being privy to every unit's turn rotation, and more importantly knowing turn rotations or enemies has a lot of impact on your success. When reaching the endgame, even with a strong party, if you don't know the mechanics of a boss or a fight, you will lose. Party composition and elemental coverage take precedence. While in Genshin, you can have like 2 or 3 parties take care of every possible situation you'll come across in Spiral Abyss, in StarRail that number can exceed 6 or more, especially given we have multiple game modes. You might have strong teams for Memory of Chaos, but you're falling short on units to clear Impure Fiction, or vice versa. As a result, players turn to the future to see which units can patch up the holes in their roster. If they find that Pure Fiction is uncomfortably difficult, they might check to see if there's an erudition character coming up who can help them out with that. Alternatively, if they're having problems with getting one-shotted in Swarm Disaster, they might try to look for a tank releasing next patch. All that's to say, StarRail puts more pressure on the player in regards to considering who they need to pull for. Granted, you don't need every 5-star in the game, but you do need good coverage. You can't just make a random party of your favorite characters. Considering free-to-play players have to be very resourceful with their Jades, leaks offer them the ability to look for the most optimal units to prioritize and save up for. So there is a more practical incentive to keep up with units coming out in 2.2, 2.3, and so on. Reason number 2 is an extension of reason 1. StarRail's only major source of gameplay is combat. Genshin Impact has 2 forms of gameplay, combat and exploration. There's a relevant amount of players who don't even care to engage in the meta and play Genshin like it's a hybrid between Breath of the Wild, Minecraft, and Animal Crossing, going through every corner of Teyvat, completing all the puzzles, finding every chest, hitting trees to collect materials to their teapots, stuff like that. StarRail's overworld exploration is close to non-existent outside of events, meaning the only thing you can really spend your time on is combat. Thankfully, they give us plenty of things to do in that respect: MOC, Pure Fiction, and SimUni with all of its game modes. That's where the player base spends the majority of their time after they're up to date on the story. But once you complete MOC and Pure Fiction, there really isn't a whole lot to do. That can compel StarRail players to gravitate towards leaks. As said earlier, leaks can build up excitement and anticipation for new units, giving us something to look forward to. With there being not much else to do in the game besides grind for more relics and stuff, you might as well look to see who you're gonna pull for next and collect materials for them. Which brings us nicely to the 3rd reason. Reason number 3 is that investing in StarRail units is far more expensive than Genshin. I regret not bringing this up in my too expensive video, but one thing I neglected to mention is how much it takes to bring a unit to an optimal or near optimal state. While we are allowed to collect materials for a character any day of the week, you need a massive quantity just to finish one unit, as not only do you have to level up their abilities, but you also have to unlock their major and minor traces. Furthermore, there's still the weapon and character ascension materials you have to obtain, and then worst of all, relics. I already voiced my grievances about the relic system back in my relic video, which I recommend you check out after this one. But suffice to say, it takes a lot more work and subsequently Trailblaze power to finish a unit in StarRail compared to Genshin. Now, I personally refresh energy every day so I get access to more daily resources. Not everyone has that luxury though, and so sometimes it might be necessary for them to know about a character well in advance for the simple fact that it will unironically take that much time to acquire a decent relic set for them and all the materials for Ascension and Traces. If I remember correctly, just the materials alone, not counting even relics, it can cost almost 2 weeks worth of naturally accumulated Trailblaze power to max out one character or something like that. That's insane considering a new 5-star comes out every 3.5 weeks. Getting decent relics alone can take months for just one unit. Unless your name is Nina, I swear to god she gets like a perfect +5 relic every other day. From a gameplay perspective, there's a greater sense of urgency in paying attention to leaks for Starra. The game's advancing very quickly to where players who are completely blind are significantly hamstringing themselves. Take Pure Fiction for example. Some players were made aware of it early on in version 1.5 through leaks, and those who did got a head start in building up their Herdas and Himegos, 2 units that likely would have never been given the time of day without Pure Fiction. I got a lot of comments in my too expensive videos saying I'm overreacting to the game's difficulty, which in hindsight I somewhat agree on, but I do stand by the notion that this game is pretty demanding on one's knowledge of the game, notably future knowledge, as they can't just wait to cross that bridge when they get there, they have to start thinking about how to cross it now. That sentiment has become more and more pronounced over time, especially recently. I would say around 1.5 the obsession over leaks has been accelerating at a breakneck pace. Before it used to be just knowing about a patch a few weeks before it came out, now we're starting to go deeper and deeper. Players are investigating Robin and Boot Hill before Acheron even came out, seeing as they were drip marketed at the tail end of 2.0. But if you thought that was crazy, people are already looking at 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 even. Starl has reached a point where by the time a unit becomes obtainable, they're already solved, which isn't necessarily bad per se, but it does raise questions over the game's condition. Last month, there was a whole debacle with the Creator Experience server, where a handful of streamers and YouTubers were officially endorsed by Hoyoverse to quite literally make leaked content on the game. It's gotten so meta to where even Hoyoverse themselves were trying to regulate leaks by essentially legalizing it. Most of you are likely up to speed on that, so I don't think I need to elaborate too much on what transpired. Again, there's nothing wrong with players knowing about stuff in advance. Many gachas allow their fanbase to openly discuss future units and whatnot as it's a core part of the gacha experience. I for one am a huge planner. I like to have a to-do list of things to work on whenever I play a game since having a direction enhances the experience for me. At the same time, I can't help but think that leaks have gotten a bit too excessive. Genshin Impact is big on leaks too, with players researching a character as soon as they're available in beta, but you don't really see too many people going nuts about it outside of big names like Farina or uniquely controversial ones like Dia. Most players don't feel the need to engage in future content for Genshin, but in Starl, I'm beginning to think it's kind of obligatory. Like I said, if you wait until when the character comes out to start working on them or to start learning about them, you're already really far behind. It's hard to think of a solution for this. In terms of gameplay, they can obviously make the character progression a bit less costly so that we can level up units very quickly, but while there are many gameplay elements that contributed to Starl's obsession with leaks, at the end of the day, the genie's out of the bottle. Leaks are getting more prevalent to the point where even casual players who don't care about the meta are consuming them just to find out who's coming next. Now that it started, it can't be stopped. The reason I wanted to make this video was to offer my thoughts on the whole situation. From my point of view, I don't think it's a major problem that will destroy the game or anything, but at what point does it become unhealthy that we're constantly looking ahead instead of appreciating what we have right now? One thing they can do to alleviate this would be to give players more stuff to do in the game so they're more focused on stuff right in front of them than stuff next month. But if they want to do that, they'll have to change up a lot of things. So we might just have to accept that this is how things will be from now on. What do you guys think about leaks? Do you think they're harmless, or do you believe they're actively damaging the experience of Starro? Feel free to share in the comments down below. That's gonna be it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, I encourage you to leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow my Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Starro discussions if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.